Hey everybody, want to learn how to make wine at home? The easy way? Stick around, I'm going to show you how it's done. Hey everybody, this is Brandon. Welcome to my new channel, where today we're going to be exploring something that a lot of people find mysterious and amazing, and simply it is making wine at home. For this, you don't need any fancy equipment or anything like that. What you are going to need are vessels to ferment with. You're going to need devices on how to transfer, or what we call racking, and just some miscellaneous equipment that you probably have laying around the house. So first thing that we need to do is get a container. Now, you don't have to go out and buy a whole bunch of fancy containers or anything like that. As a matter of fact, when I get containers, I actually ask my local grocery store in the bakery department. I talk to the people back there and I ask them to hold on to some of these smaller buckets for me. These are actually old icing buckets that they use for decorating cakes. And you get them home, you scrub them real clean, let them dry out, you sterilize them, and you can use these. All you have to do is drill a small hole in the lid, put in a grommet for your airlock, you're good to go, and you just saved yourself some money. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to set it aside. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go over basically what you're going to need today, and it's super simple. First thing you're going to need is you're going to need your juice. Now, I go and I pick up juice from a local big box store. And the main thing that you want to do is you want to look on the ingredients. You want to make sure that there's no sulfites or anything like that, any type of preservatives that are going to stunt your yeast, because this is going to be fermented. And as we can see right here on this label, for the ingredients, grape juice from concentrate, ascorbic acid, which is fine, and citric acid, which is fine as well. None of that is going to harm the yeast. No sulfites or anything of that nature, so this is going to be good to go. Now, I have two of these today because I'm going to be making a 1.5 gallon batch. What you're going to need also is you're going to need plain old table sugar. Now, some people say that you need specialized sugars and stuff like that. You can, but I find that the table sugar works just fine. Another thing that you're going to need is an airlock. I'll show you that a little bit later as we put this wine together. Some people talk about, oh, well, I can put a rubber band over it or just loosen the cap or something. Listen, airlocks are cheap. They're $2, and they serve a major purpose, which is not only to keep air from going in, but it's also designed to keep bugs out. Specifically like fruit flies, stuff of that nature. We'll go over how it's done a little bit later on. So what I'm going to bring up now is your yeast. Now, I have made this wine with bread yeast, Fleischmann's in the jar, the red label, and it works fine. The problem I run into is the bread yeast doesn't really fall completely out, and you tend to have some residual floaties, for lack of a better term. So for this batch, what I'm going to be using is the Lalvin D47, and You may say, well, why are you using that particular yeast? Well, because I have several packets of this left. I have used this in the past. This is a wine yeast. Now, since this whole packet is enough to make a 5-gallon batch, I'm not going to be making that much today. I'm only going to be making 1.5 gallons. So what I like to do is take a cup, any cup of dew. I'm just using this for my Nutri Ninja because it's got ridges in it. It kind of helps it. And I'm going to pour some of this juice into the cup. And this is just to rehydrate my yeast. Okay, I think that'll be plenty. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yeast, cut the top off, and you don't have to be totally precise with this. So I'm just going to eyeball about half the packet. That'll be plenty. Now, a lot of people ask me when I do this, well, what do you do with the rest of it? Well, as you can see, I'm going to roll it up, and I'm going to take a piece of Scotch painter's tape, and I'm going to seal it up, and it's going to go into the refrigerator. And the next time I make a batch of wine of this size, I have half a pack ready to go, and that'll be the first one that I use. Now, with the yeast in there, you just kind of give it a stir. If you don't have a cup with ridges, that's perfectly fine. Get you a spoon and just stir it up in any kind of cup that you do have, and that'll be perfectly fine. And this, a lot of people talk about making a yeast starter. This is not a yeast starter. All I'm doing is rehydrating the yeast. And this is just the way that I like to do it. Do you have to do it? No. I've made beers before and stuff of that nature, which we'll cover in future videos. And on those, the instructions tell us to go ahead and just sprinkle it on top and then cover it and allow it to ferment, and that works just fine too, and you're more than welcome to do that as well. Now, so I got my yeast hydrated, and now let's go ahead and put together this wine. So to my 2-gallon bucket, excuse me, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go ahead and add the remaining grape juice, which I am using just from Walmart, the no sugar added 100% grape juice. And I'm just going to pour that in. Try not to make a mess of it. And then what I'm going to do also is I am going to add my sugar. 1.5 cups of sugar. And the reason I do this now is I don't want it too full. I'm going to have to stir this up and get it mixed up really well. And it's easier to do when you have a smaller amount in there. Now hold on just a second, because silly me, I forgot to get my spoon to stir this up with. I'll be right back. And I'm back. Okay, I just went ahead and got a plastic slotted spoon. It could be a solid spoon. I try to stay away from metal when I'm dealing with plastic, because if you stir it too hard, you can wind up scraping and gouging the plastic, and that'll wind up being not good, because you'll wind up having bacteria and stuff like that get into the container later on after you use it. You won't be able to get it totally sterilized, and you could wind up with something funky in your bucket later on. So just to be on the safe side, wood or plastic, I prefer to use the plastic. just because the wood does tend to stain a little. And I'm just going to stir this up until the sugar's all dissolved. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch this whole thing. And when I come back, all the sugar will be stirred and dissolved into it. See you in a minute. Okay, we're back. I just stirred this and stirred this and stirred this, making sure I hit the bottom. Now when you're stirring this up, you'll be able to hear the spoon making contact with the bottom and kind of dragging the grains of the sugar around on the bottom, and that's perfectly normal. Just continue to stir nice and easy. Try not to slosh out or anything, but just stir it up. Make sure that when you go around the bottom, see, like right now, there's no gritty feeling or sounding like sandpaper against the plastic. It's just like if it was just straight juice. Now, what I'm going to do now is I am going to pour most of this second jug of grape juice into the container as well. I'm going to reserve probably about maybe this much, and I'll show you why a little bit later. So I try not to water down my mixture. I try to use juice, just straight juice whenever possible. If you do wind up, let's say like you wanted to do a little bit more but you didn't want to put in more juice, then my suggestion would be to use spring water. I wouldn't use tap water or anything like that because of the chlorine and stuff like that. That can stunt the production of your yeast. Now, since I've added that juice in here, now that I've added that juice in here, I'm going to stir that up along with the juice that I dissolved the sugar into. And that only takes a brief moment. It doesn't take very long at all. About like that. Smells great. Now, on this wine right here, this is going to be more of a sweet red. I don't like mine terribly sweet. Some recipes that tell you to use 2 cups per gallon. I find that to be more of a dessert type wine, and I don't care for that too much, and neither does my wife. So through trial and error, I've kind of cut back, and this gives a delicate sweet. The juice is already sweet. It's full of fermentable sugars. In this container right here, it gives a listing of 36 grams of sugar per 8 fluid ounces. So that's per cup, and I have 1.5 gallons in here. And I do apologize, I do have dogs, and they don't understand, hey, it's time to be quiet when I am doing videos, but you know what, that's okay. Now, we are almost to the point now of being close to being done, but we still have a few steps that I always like to do just to make sure everything is good. Now as you can see, the color with my yeast mixture, you can see it's kind of got a milky color to it. It's not the deep purple from the grape juice anymore, and oh yeah, you can smell it real yeasty, like a yeast roll. Let you know, yeah, they're happy and they're working. So what I'm going to do with this is this is called pitching the yeast. I don't understand why, because I am pouring the yeast. So let's go ahead and let's pitch this yeast. Just like that. Now, there's still some residual yeast along the sides here. I'm going to take that leftover juice and kind of pour it down the sides a little bit and see if I can loosen some of that up. And I'll take my handy dandy spoon that I stirred with and, try and scrape it down. Because now what's going to happen is your yeast is going to, once they start going really good, they're going to form a colony. And they're going to multiply expeditiously. I mean, just go nuts. Now, with the leftover juice that's in the container, I'm just going to pour it in. And that's it. Now, on this bucket, I've got approximately this much here. That's pretty good for those two containers. Now, some people would say, oh, well, you did a good job, that's it. And pretty much, folks, yes, what we have done here is we have prepared our must for our winemaking. But what I like to do is this. I do use some specialized equipment, but it's nothing extravagant. Okay? I use a hydrometer. Now, two things about the hydrometer. It helps you to determine your starting gravity and your final gravity of your brews. Starting gravity and final gravity, all that is just a measurement of how much sugar is left in your beverage before you start and after the fermentation process is over. And using an app on your phone or by a simple calculation, which we'll go over later when it comes to that, you can determine what your alcohol by volume is going to be on this. Now, the D47 on this right here, I'm looking somewhere between 11 and 14% with what's in here. So, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a sample. And the way that I do that is with a turkey baster. Now, anything that you use in here, make sure you sterilize it. The turkey baster sterilized. The graduated cylinder is sterilized. My hydrometer is sterilized. Everything's good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to take the sample and put it into my cylinder. And a lot of people ask me, Brandon, why do you take the reading after you pitch your yeast? Well, mainly because when you add in that much juice, even though it looked like it wasn't a whole lot, it can change your gravity reading. So I want this to be as accurate as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hydrometer and I'm going to set it in. I'm going to kind of stir it around in case there's any air bubbles or anything, and I'm going to give it a spin. And this is going to tell me what my starting gravity is. Okay. It looks like 1.090. Based on that, I'm thinking about adding some more sugar to this, just to bump up the gravity a little bit, because I do not want this going dry. I do want this to be closer to the 1.115. So I'm going to get, let me get another cup of sugar. I'll be right back. We'll mix that in and we'll take another reading and we'll see where we stand. I'll be right back with that sugar. Okay, I'm back with that sugar. Before we do anything with it, what I want to do is take my hydrometer out and I'm going to put it back in my bucket of sanitizer water, which what I utilize is Star San. It's basically like a mild acid, but it sterilizes everything, or sanitizes, I should say. Now, this is still good. I'm going to add this back in here before I add my sugar. And as I said earlier, I do apologize for the dogs barking, but it's that time of the day when people start coming home, so they want to let the neighbors know, hey, I've been watching the neighborhood while you were gone. Now, I'm looking at the whole situation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add about another cup of just regular white table sugar. And then I'm going to stir that in, mix it up really, really well. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a hydrometer reading after it's all stirred together. And as before, I'm not going to make you guys sit here while I stir all this. So once it's all mixed together, I'll come back and we'll take another gravity reading to see where we sit at that point. So be with you in a couple of minutes. Okay, and we're back. It sounds and it feels like the sugar's been dissolved really well. And I'm giving it a really good stir. Now at this point, we're doing two things. We're stirring in the sugar, but also we're adding oxygen to the must. That's just going to help the yeast get started. Once the yeast start producing and start multiplying and everything, they're going to start releasing CO2. The CO2 is going to force the oxygen out, and you're going to have this layer of CO2 on top, and that's going to help prevent spoilage of your must. Now we've got all of that stirred in. We're going to take another hydrometer reading. So, get my cylinder and my handy dandy turkey baster, and we're going to put in about the same amount we did last time. You never want to fill this up all the way, but you want to make sure you got enough in there to allow it to float. All right. So now I'm going to get my hydrometer out of the sanitizer water. Make sure I get some of that sanitizer water off. And just like before, we're going to put it in, give it a little bit of a stir and a spin. And that just helps give you a more accurate reading. And it'll make sure that you're not getting any kind of a false Okay, it looks like this is going to be 1.100. You know what? I'm good with that, and I'll tell you why. Because the solution that I have here, it's a little on the warm side. And honestly, I don't want to make this too sweet. And I'm afraid if I add any more sugar to this, then it's going to make it a little too sweet for my liking. And as you go on and you experiment, you can start off with small 1 gallon batches, and you'll determine the level that you like. But on this right here at 1.100, you know what? I'm good with that. I can live with that. Now, a lot of people will tell you, oh, don't use this, don't use this. Listen, My hydrometer is clean. My cylinder's clean. I use Star Sand on it and everything. Everything in here is good. And at this point, you still want to oxygenate. So I'm not going to waste this. I'm going to go ahead and pour this into the bucket. Just like that. And I'll put my cylinder over here in my water. Now, here's what we're going to do. We are going to take our lid to our bucket and we're going to put this on. Make sure you snap it in place just like that. What I like to do is I will take a piece of tape and put it on the side of the bucket. And I'm going to put today's date on it, which is 3/4/20. And starting gravity of 1.100. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my container of Star Sand, and I'm going to get all my little pieces for my airlock. Now, let's talk about the airlock for a moment. All right, this is what is called the 3-piece airlock. On here, there's a line right here. It's going to show you how much water or spirits or something to have in this. Now, like I said earlier, this thing serves two purposes. This is to allow the CO2 to push the oxygen out, and it's going to allow CO2 to escape from your must. Otherwise, if it had nowhere to go, guess what? This could blow up. So what we are going to do is we're going to just take some of our sanitizer water, put in our little cap like this, and this top. And that's just an extra layer of protection. There's little holes on this plastic top, and it's going to allow the CO2 and stuff to push out. And then you just insert this into the hole, also known as a bung, and that's it. Now, what I do is I check by pushing down on the lid. And as you can see, when you push down on the lid, you see some of that air pushed out. That tells me that this is good and sealed, and this airlock is going to work fine. Now the big question, how long do I let this sit? I'm going to let this sit for at least 3 weeks. And this is why I'm going to do that. It's going to give it plenty of time to ferment out. What I'm going to do is at week 2, if the airlock stopped working, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come take a sample, get a reading, and see what that gravity level is. And if it looks fine, then what I'm going to do is let it sit for another week, come back, take another sample, read that, and if they're the same level, then I know it's finished. And then what I'm going to do from that point is I'm going to rack off this, and that'll be our next video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a dark place, out of the way. I have a closet that I use for fermentation, and when I see you in a few weeks, it'll be to the point where we are going to do our first racking, which is to take our wort, or at that point it'll be our wine, off as much of the sediment and dead yeast and everything that's going to drop to the bottom of the bucket, and it's going to go into another container. And then we're going to let that sit for a few more weeks. And that's just going to help allow more of that to come out. After that second period of time, we do the 2-rack rule. We'll rack that off again into another container and leaving behind as much sediment as possible. And what we will do is we will take a final gravity reading for our overall alcohol content, and then we'll taste it and we'll see how it does. So come back in for the next video on this, and we'll be racking this off from here and doing our secondary fermentation. If you have any questions about how to get started or any of the equipment or anything that I'm using, feel free to drop a comment below. I read every comment that comes in. And other than that, I will see you in about 3 weeks where we take a look at our product. Okay, folks, just don't be afraid of this. This is not rocket science. Anybody can brew, and it's super simple. I'm going to be coming along with other recipes of different types of wine. We'll be making meads. I'll even be showing you guys how to brew beer at home as well. So if there's anything in particular that you like or you don't like, let me know. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe. There's going to be a lot more content coming. I do plan on having a video once a week, if at all possible, to show you guys what's going on and how to make your own wine and beer at home. You guys take care. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you soon on the next video. Bye.